Tonight, we walk into the oldest shadow known to the human mind. A shadow that has followed us long before we learned to speak. Long before we carved symbols into stone. Long before we named the stars. Death. It waits behind every story. Every heartbeat. Every breath. Not as a threat. Not as an enemy. But as a presence. A horizon. A boundary woven into existence itself. For thousands of years. Philosophers, mystics, wanderers, and poets have all paused before this horizon and asked the same question. What does it mean to no longer be? Some say death is a door. Others say it is an end. Some say it is a return. A dissolving. A drifting back into whatever silence stood before creation. But before we explore their answers, we must begin with something far simpler. Far quieter. The world, before you were born. Think of that time. If you can even call it time. There was no sound. No color. No memory. No fear. No anticipation. No you to imagine anything at all. Just absence. A stillness so complete that even the idea of stillness had not yet been invented. Many philosophers look at that void and say, you have already tasted death. You have already lived it. The nothingness before your beginning is identical to the nothingness after your ending. And if the first did not frighten you, why should the second? But this thought, quiet as it is, does not calm everyone. Because death is not only the absence of life. It is the disappearance of the witness. The one who sees. The one who loves. The one who remembers. What does it mean for the one behind your eyes to vanish? Socrates believed that death is either a dreamless sleep or a passage to another realm, where the soul continues its inquiry. He feared neither. He said, if death is a dreamless sleep, then it is peace. If death is another journey, then it is adventure. Epicurus, centuries later, took a sharper, colder stance. He said, death is nothing to us. Because when we exist, death is not present. And when death is present, we no longer exist. To him, fear of death was fear of a ghost that can never touch us. But we are not only made of reason. We are made of attachment. Memory. Longing. Love. Reason can say, death is nothing. But your heart replies, this nothing feels heavy. The Stoics looked at death not as a threat, but as a companion. An advisor who whispers, do not waste your life. Everything you have is borrowed. To them, death was a teacher. A reminder that every moment is fragile. That nothing belongs to you. Not even yourself. Buddhism took a different approach. It said that the self you fear losing was never solid to begin with. It was a pattern. A temporary knot in the river of existence. Death, then, is simply the untying of that knot. But even these ideas, elegant as they are, do not silence the pulse of human grief. Because death is not only about you. It is about those you love. Those you lose. Those whose absence becomes a weight inside your chest. To understand death, you must understand the empty spaces it leaves behind. The spaces that make philosophers question whether life is defined by presence, or by the shadows left when presence disappears. We have reached a quiet point in our exploration. A midpoint in the night. A soft clearing between ideas. And before we continue deeper, Before we walk further into the long corridor of human thought, I want to ask you something. Tell me. Where are you listening from tonight? What part of the world? Hold your quiet. What room? What street? What city? What sky surrounds you in this moment? And what time is it? In the place you call home? Type it in the comments. I want to know who is traveling through this darkness with me. Who is awake? Who is breathing slowly? Who is wondering these questions? Beside me. As we step further into the night, into the quiet corridors of human thought, we encounter a question that grows heavier with each answer. Is death the enemy, or the teacher? The ancients argued endlessly. Some believed that death is a punishment. Others, a liberation. Some feared it. Some embraced it. Take the Egyptians, for example. They spent lifetimes preparing for death. Building tombs, writing spells, creating elaborate rituals. Because they believed that the soul persists. That it journeys beyond the body. And that the way it is remembered shapes its eternity. Death, to them, was a voyage. A crossing of thresholds. From the known to the unknown. A transition measured in heartbeats and hieroglyphs. Not in hours or years. In ancient Greece, we meet Plato. Plato looked at death as a liberation of the soul. He imagined that our bodies are prisons. And death, the unlocking of the gates. To him, the philosopher should not fear death. The philosopher seeks wisdom. And wisdom demands the release from bodily chains. In his dialogues, Socrates explains. The soul, if it is pure, will ascend. Will continue in a realm beyond human sight. Yet, for Aristotle, the perspective was different. Death is a natural limit, a boundary that marks the end of potential. It is not punishment, nor reward. It is simply the cessation of life's capacity to act, to learn, to flourish. Here we see a subtle divergence. Some see death as transformation. Others see it as finality. Some see it as peace. Others as loss. Let us move east, to India. Hinduism and its teachings on samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, frame death not as an end, but as continuity. The soul, or Atman, moves through lifetimes. Learning, evolving, accruing karma. Until it reaches moksha, liberation from the cycle. Return to the infinite. In this view, death is a step. A passage between rooms of a vast house. Not the extinguishing of the candle, but the lighting of a new flame. Buddhism takes a slightly different approach. It does not promise a soul that persists. Instead, it observes impermanence. The self, the I, is a temporary pattern. A cluster of sensations, thoughts, and perceptions. Death dissolves this pattern. Nothing persists, nothing clings, nothing lingers. Yet paradoxically, this dissolution is not feared. Because everything is impermanent. Suffering arises from clinging. And clinging dies with the self. In the West, Christianity offers another lens. Death is a gate. It is a passage to judgment. To reward or punishment. To eternity in a state aligned with moral conduct. Fear and hope coexist. The soul may ascend, or descend. Depending on how life was lived. On acts of love, of sin, of faith. Islam offers a similar duality. Life is a test. Death is a transition, a return to the Creator. An accountability, a reckoning. Yet also a mercy. The faithful are promised reunion with the loved ones. And the unjust face consequences. In worlds beyond comprehension. Notice a pattern. Across cultures, death is not merely an event. It is a mirror. A lens through which life itself is measured, valued, feared, or understood. Philosophers of the modern age approached death with another lens: reason, psychology, and science. Heidegger called death the possibility of impossibility. He suggested that authentic living is impossible without confronting death. To be aware that one will die, that every tomorrow is borrowed, creates urgency, clarity, and freedom. Existentialists like Sartre and Camus saw death as the ultimate absurdity. It renders life meaningless if we cling only to permanence. Yet, paradoxically, this absurdity also frees us. If everything is fleeting, then every choice, every act, every moment of consciousness becomes precious, immediate, radiant. Nietzsche, in his fierce, poetic way, urged us to embrace life precisely because it is finite. To live fully, is to dance with death. Each heartbeat, each glance, each breath is illuminated by the knowledge that one day it will end. Even Freud, in his quiet analytic chambers, approached death indirectly. He spoke of the death drive, thanatos, a force intertwined with life itself. A compulsion not only toward destruction, but toward returning to a state of stillness, of calm, of dissolution. Science, in our age, offers no comfort, and yet profound insight. Modern biology reminds us that death is inevitable. Cells decay, organs fail, DNA unravels. Entropy governs all systems. Yet this inevitability, instead of paralyzing fear, can inspire awe. Cosmology, too, whispers the same lesson. Stars are born, they live, they die. Galaxies collide, expand, and fade. The universe itself may have an end. And yet, we exist for a brief moment within this vast unfolding. Our lives are small, finite, and yet deeply significant. And here is a subtle, quiet beauty. Death is not an anomaly in nature. It is part of its pattern. A turning, a dissolving, a returning. Soft, slow wind, distant echoes. Some thinkers, like Epicurus, remind us again that fear is unnecessary. When we are, death is not. When death is, we are not. The paradox is simple. Yet the human heart struggles to accept it. Because the heart remembers. The heart imagines. The heart loves. And with love comes grief. With attachment comes longing. And with memory, the impossibility of returning. Consider Kierkegaard's quiet meditation on anxiety. He suggested that awareness of death is the awareness of infinite possibility. And infinite limitation. Our mortality shapes every choice. Every love. Every sorrow. Every dream. And yet, death also whispers a strange freedom. It is the limit that grants life its shape. Without death, the present would collapse. Without ending, beginning would have no meaning. And so, as our exploration nears its close, we carry with us the gentle, unwavering reminder. Death is the horizon. Life is the path. And our awareness of both is the awakening of the soul. And when you breathe out, slowly, let the stillness settle. And carry with you the quiet understanding that has echoed through millennia. You are alive. You are finite. You are luminous. And this moment, this very breath, is enough.